Yeah, the skull's starting to look a little better. You just got to keep poking at it. And a skull, again, is something to have, have reference of a skull.
Yeah, I totally have like a perfectly recast plastic skull on my table where I'm working. Now, I didn't when we were sculpting this, but I do in my studio.
I've got like a plaster of Paris one I've had since I was a little kid, and I did all kinds of horrible things to it, but I've still got it, and it's still very accurate. It is. I tried to paint a black mohawk on it or something. I don't know. So that hand is starting to look a little better. You want to go in there and do the knuckles.
At some point, I think I told you your axe is looking boring.
It's a little boring right now.
Can you get on there later?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I thought you were going to work on the leg for a minute.
No.
False alarm. If you were looking for a leg sculpting seminar, you're just out of luck. This is upper body intensive. Now it looks kick-ass from this angle right here, the whole abdomen area.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, again, it's just repetition. I mean, I've sculpted an upper body of a guy, I don't know, 500, 1,000 times. I mean, I have no life, and I have no friends.
That's a big part of it.
So that's I mean,
having no life and the time to sink into doing it over and over.
Man, that is true. If you are out partying and you're out drinking beers and all that, sculpting might not be for you. You've got to be a hermit,
a nerd.
You got to be a nerd, and you've got to want to sit there for hours and hours and hours, and then have everybody criticize it, and then go home and cry. That was like a Morrissey song almost. It was like an old Smith song. And this seems obvious, but the fingers are not all the same length. I can't tell you how many sculptures I've seen where people make the fingers the same length. And I'm like,
right.
Wow.
Right.
That's one of those things where you see...
And when they're in a fist, the sections
they're
are not the same length.
Right.
The fist coming at you, that first section of fingers are not the same length.
Yeah, when you make a fist, it's way more like diagonal than it is a square, kind of. This is the tricky thing of sculpting things in front of a camera, is it's going to look terrible for a long time. But this is keeping it real. This is what it looks like. You throw a piece of clay on there, and you just keep poking at it until something happens.
Right there, you can see that little squiggly vein.
Yeah, a little back and forth.
Right on the top of the shoulder. Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm always kind of on the fence about nipples. I mean, you don't want to, I like to keep the nipples pretty subtle. Yeah, and it was good. You put the little bumps on the gauntlet and the bumps on the helmet. That definitely added some detail.
It made him a little more
spacey,
a little more sci-fi, a little more John Carter of Mars.
surprised you didn't try to make him a steampunk girl.
Well, we all have our strengths, and
yeah, those horns could have been longer. They could have come out. That might have been funner if they would have come out further in front of the. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, but. And that little line I'm putting there on the trap is just giving it a top. It's just taking it upward and making it more 3D. He needs some more lat behind his arm. I hope we do that.
there are these striations in the chest you're kind of getting to right here. I think I kept asking you to do that while you were working.
And this is where the reference can really pay off. When you start getting, not towards the end, but when you've got it blocked out and you're trying to get those little subtle things that look real. Man, you can steal some stuff from a photograph that go a long way. And then after you keep taking stuff from photographs, you just start to remember it. And it just becomes muscle memory, kind of.
And now you can see that sword, the second weapon. It's a little pig sticker.
And given enough time, we would have probably added a little monster at his feet or something, a little warhog or a war dragon or maybe a maiden. Poking at the scabbard of the sword a little. That might have been a good area for a little bit of Bondo, honestly, towards the back of that sword. And I really can't express how much everybody would do this stuff a little bit differently.
Even me and Jared
Right.
do a lot of things a little bit differently. So a lot of this is to your own taste, you know. What process feels most comfortable for you?
Yeah, like I'll often bake my pieces several times, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 times, heat gun them every once in a while. And Brandon didn't like to bake them, but I just like to get the pieces really dense, and I don't want them to move about on me at all.
I'm more like to bake them once, you know, at the very end.
Yeah. And neither way is right or wrong. It's just what you're comfortable with. And on these, on the axe here, again, I like to create a pattern. say the lines going down to the left, and then throw in one going the opposite way to the right. Create a pattern and then break it. It makes the eye look at it. Familiar, familiar, unfamiliar. On its very small level. But yeah, like I would, if I had this guy at home, I might bake him and then wet sand him all over. And then after you wet sand him, you kind of build up this the sanding muck, the sanding funk and film, little white stuff that kind of builds up. And you want to put him, maybe say, I would put him back under the faucet and get a large clean paintbrush and just kind of brush all that stuff off. And then I would put him in front of my fan and turn him a little bit and make sure I got all the water out from everywhere. And then he might look a little scratched up and stuff. Even though he's not really scratched up, he might look a little like, you would sanded him. And so what I like to do is I have a primer, a miniature primer for Dungeons and Dragons that I would spray him. And luckily for us, it's the exact same color gray. So now you want to avoid the automotive primer that you might find in a Walmart or somewheres, because that by nature is going to go into the cracks and fill it up. That's what it's meant to do. But the primer for miniatures, if you use it correctly, it's not going to fill in any of the detail. So I would primer it, and then I would hit it with Vaseline, the areas I wanted to apply more Sculpey. And then I would work on it and maybe heat gun it or bake it again. And that's just that's my process on that. I might bake it a couple of times, sand it, and keep adding stuff to it.
I think you saw us for a minute working on his tunic, his little loincloth area. And that sculpting drapery and cloth and clothing is a difficult, tricky proposition. Not something we are really good at.
Oh, there's all kinds of things we'll avoid. I have a lot of difficulty sculpting a straight line. Yeah. Like if we were asked to sculpt a Rubik's Cube, it would be one of the toughest things ever.
Right. We avoid hardware. Like robotics,
mechanical stuff,
mecha, yeah. But the drapery is fun when you get it right. It's just difficult to do. We remember we had that book, the Byrne Hogarth,
Dynamic Wrinkles.
I
still got, I've got that.
Great, but it was about drawing drapery, but still
it's just page after page of what wrinkles do, where and how.
It was invaluable if you're sculpting clothing.
There's a lot of great Byrne Hogarth books.
Here you can see the good people at Noman have swooped in, saved the day, and brought us more Super Sculpey Firm the medium gray. So we're replacing the stuff on the back that was dark. And this is just a fur cape flying off.
And that happens. Stuff gets put on and taken off and taken off and put on.
Yeah, it looks good right here from this angle.
And the back of my hand there is just holding it, steadying it.
Oh, yeah, come close up on the eye.
And about setting the eyes in deep enough. I think I had set them in deep enough, but I hadn't set them in high enough. So his eyes were too low. So I kept having to cut that brow upwards. And man, I did that 3 or 4 times because I just kept thinking, geez, his eyes are so low on his face, it's not right. So I kept cheating that a little. It's all an illusion. I mean, the first time you put the eyes on are probably not where the eyes are definitely going to be.
Oh, yeah, right here, I think I told you to make the axe, at least the axe head, a little more interesting than just one big flat slab.
Yeah, the front of the axe is a good opportunity to create another plane. As you can see, it's happened there.
I think you also go in here and make it like a nick.
Yeah.
Out of the metal, like a crack.
He's been using it.
It's been put to good use. Killing.
God, that sounded terrible.
Killing men.
Oh my God, I've been sculpting killers all my life. I didn't realize that.
That's true.
No, he's just chopping down trees. What are you talking about?
And also your shoulders weren't symmetrical enough for me in the beginning.
Yeah, and you were right about that. Oh, you were the left hand, yeah.
So you started. So on the right shoulder, you actually started carving away a pretty good bit of it.
I did.
And then you were bulking up the left shoulder because it was offset, and you corrected that. You did really well on that. Now you're giving a little love to the other side of the chest.
And some of those muscles are to the left. They're almost just placeholders. They're like, okay, this is where this is going to be. This is about where this is going to be. You know, later on, I'll go in here and put it exactly where I want it. Hopefully. And I mean, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think we have great expectations.
This is where that muscle will be. Yeah, right. When you get around to it.
So often it's like, I'm going to do this later, and then it just ends up being that, you know. Oh, the back of his triceps could just be way bigger. I was really nervous. This was filmed at the Noman Workshop, the School of Visual Arts out in Hollywood. And it's the real deal out there. We're from a small town in Texas, and
man, I know you're nervous when you start making the triceps too small.
I'm telling you. Every tricep I've ever done is just ripping off Simon Bisley. That's what I thought was cool. The Bisley Lobo.
We were so lucky early on in our career. We did a lot of pieces based on Simon Bisley artwork. Even later in our career with the Venom versus Spider-Man statue.
Yeah, Danzig. Glenn Danzig.
Hired us to do quite a few.
We did our first 3 resin kits, and he just said, pick whatever Bisley pieces, that Simon had done for Verotic, and that was just a blast to work on. I mean, that was all surreal, really. Went to some crazy Danzig parties.
Yeah.
Good times.
The less said there, the better. This hand, you're filling out a little bit. You're finally...
Yeah. It's good to get those knuckles, to do each knuckle individually.
And this back thumb. See, and the back of this hand is, almost the back side of the piece from our front again, which is somewhere near the right shoulder.